Howdy, and welcome to the EEARSS Podcast, produced by Terrier TV. What up, guys? How's it going? How are things?
Boy, that was quick. He went straight from.
Yeah, I did. I figured I'd just jump right into it.
How are you guys?
I'm not prepared to answer that question.
I know there's usually a little bit of gap in between, but I figured I'd just jump right on it.
Usually, you tell us a little bit about your week, and then
I was going to get to that.
Go in there.
I was going to get to that.
So, you've been in the country this whole week?
Yeah. Maybe not mentally.
We never know.
Maybe not mentally. Belize was. That was an exhausting trip, and I don't think you realize it until a couple days afterwards when you're randomly like falling out in the middle of the day.
Trying
to recover.
How different of a time zone is it?
It's only 2 hours. It's only a 2-hour flight.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, it's quicker to go from there than it is to Chicago. It's a really quick flight. You're down there in a minute, and then you're frying. You know, it's everybody always talks about our heat. How it's super super hot. It's like a very humid hot. I'm like, go to Central America and let's talk about it again. Because it's a different level. It's a different level. It's like your insides are being radiated. It's just the heat just hits you, and there's no escape.
Now,
a shade tree makes no difference either. It's
okay. Because my son lives in El Paso, Texas.
Okay.
And it's hot there. It gets hot there, but the shade does make a ton of difference. But that's because it's a dry heat. So, but you're talking about a lot of humidity and.
Oh yeah, you're sweating as soon as you walk in the door. And then when you do get in the shade, because you think you're escaping from the heat, then you have the tarantulas running around and the scorpions running around, and you're kind of just watching them all the time, trying to figure out where they're at and what they're up to.
Is that one of those places where first thing in the morning, you shake your shoes out before you put them on?
I did every single time. Yeah, because Marissa, who we were staying with down there with the Crocodile Research Coalition, we're just sleeping in the house, and you have a tarantula walk by or a scorpion like laying on the middle of the floor, and you're like, what is that? Oh, it's a big scorpion. Okay. Well,
there you go.
Then Marissa picks them up and runs them outside, and I'm
absolutely not.
I'm like, cool. It's things I don't understand. I don't wish them any harm. So it's neat to see somebody just like I would do with a snake, just pick it up and toss it outside and go on their way. It's pretty nuts. But yeah, you just got back from a trip, right?
I did. I went camping.
Yeah. Where'd you guys go?
Where'd you go?
I think my weather was much better than yours, though. We went over to Alexander Springs in Ocala.
Ooh,
the springs are always
one of my favorite places. I like that place.
It was like at night it was low 60s. It was perfect tent weather.
Now, how bad were the raccoons?
We have learned from our past mistakes, so our site is fine. We lock everything down. Our friends that we went with did not heed that warning, and raccoons definitely got into stuff.
Oh yeah, they are. My daughters to this day are scared to death of raccoons because of their experience they had there. Oh yeah, those are some rascally raccoons.
The most terrifying middle of the night thing that ever happened there when we were camping, though, was a group of owls. I love owls, but if you're not expecting to hear an owl at 3 a.m. literally right outside your mesh window.
Oh yeah, they're not quiet either.
And what the owl had caught.
Ooh.
That's awesome. Wow.
I woke up from a dead sleep one night, he just screaming, and I'm like, what is that? What is that? And from the next 10 I hear, it's owls, Cindy, it's owls. Okay. This is fine. Everything's fine.
That's hilarious. No. I like it.
There you go. Yeah. Hey, it's an experience there.
Yeah, it's what you're out there in it for. To enjoy stuff like that. So you guys ready to jump into this? I've been very excited about this conversation for quite a long time.
Uh-huh.
Mentally prepared?
Mentally prepared.
Okay, I'm good. So today on the podcast, we are joined by Duane De Freese with One Lagoon, Indian River Lagoon, the executive director of the Indian River Lagoon Council. Explain to us how that all works again, Duane. You just explained that to me off the air, and now I feel like we need to have that same discussion on the air real quick.
I got to tell you, your first conversation is going to be hard to beat. We had scorpions, we had raccoons, we had owls. We missed bears and crocodiles. We would have been there.
There were crocodiles involved. We just left that out of the story this time around.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah, so I'm the executive director of the IRL Council. And the council was created back in 2016. And you may remember, that was when we had that terrible brown tide bloom fish kill. And the local governments, mainly the counties, got together and said, the National Estuary Program needs to be restructured to this new suite of problems. And so the state agencies, the Water Management District, 7 counties got together, and they created a new special district of the state of Florida called the IRL Council. And that council has only one responsibility, and that's to be the agency host for the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. And I'm also the executive director of that. And so we've got this legal entity, and then we have this program that is a federally funded program with significant local state matching monies. So totally kind of configured the way the National Estuary Program worked, increased the amount of revenues, but most importantly, the driving force for that reorganization was an interest among the counties to build a greater level of involvement, responsibility, and leadership at the local level. So it wasn't this top-down federal program where you just hand out money, but a fully operational program with a very, very large community base, which really makes us maybe one of the most unique programs in the nation. So there's 28 national estuary programs dedicated by the U.S. Congress in the Clean Water Act, and the mandate and the authority is to create a management conference that brings all the stakeholders together to address what are the problems, build a management and restoration plan, and then track that. So I actually serve 100 volunteers, scientists, citizens across the 5-county region, and everything funnels through those advisory councils to a board of directors who are the board of the IRL Council. Very unique.
I have a geography question.
Mm-hmm.
How far south does the Indian River go officially? How far?
So officially, as an estuary, we go from Ponce Inlet in Volusia County to the very center of Jupiter Inlet on the north side of Palm Beach County. And we have extended our program boundary another 25 miles up the Halifax River to bring Volusia County in as a full county. So we've got 5 counties that are directly on the lagoon proper. Palm Beach County, it's got that little sliver at the north end of their boundary, right at Jupiter Inlet. And then on our western boundary, that's a watershed-based boundary. Pretty narrow up here in Titusville. But you get down to St. Lucie County, Martin County, it extends into Okeechobee County, almost to Lake Okeechobee. So it's a large regional watershed.
Oh, okay.
Duane, you're kind of I don't say kind of, you're a legend in this world of doing all this stuff for the lagoon. You've been working on it for so long. You've like you're saying, you're working with all these different individuals that are doing so many different things. What's the biggest thing that really gives you hope with where all these things are going?
There's a lot that gives me hope now. But when we were in the midst of this catastrophic decline in a system, which started in 2011 with an algal bloom we called the super bloom, we really had no idea how long we were going to be in that moment of decline. And it was really significant. So we had harmful algal blooms starting in 2011 that were really large, really intense, and species we had never seen before. And then, fish kill that was as big as we've probably seen in history in 2016. But during that 9-year period, we lost 90% of the seagrass coverage. And it's, like losing all the trees in a tropical rainforest. Coming back from that, we thought was going to be decades. And I'm really happy to report that we've been surprised this year. We have seagrass regrowth up in southern end of Mosquito Lagoon that looks like the old days. The sad part of that story, as you move southward, that coverage and acreage is very patchy. It's going to be slow. Seagrasses are flowering advanced plants, and the key to all of this is water quality. And so, I'm really encouraged by the state level of investment, but even more encouraged by the public investment. In Brevard County, no question, is a leader in that regard with the Save Our Indian River Lagoon program. You don't see a program like that at a county level almost anywhere in the nation. $50 million a year every year for 10 years dedicated to an estuary restoration. You know, that's what makes me excited, that we're working together. We're working as this large 156 plus mile system, you know, and we've got money at the table that can actually help us do the work. You can talk about it all you want. You can write 1 million management plans, but if you don't have the financial investment, it doesn't happen, and we're right there now.
What things are being done right now with those funds that you think are being the most impactful?
Oh, some of it's incremental, so septic to sewer is never going to be kind of the most exciting thing in any given 12-month period, but every single county is putting money into septic to sewer conversion. Almost every wastewater utility is looking at upgrades. And so we've got what I would call that wave of incremental. And I say every project is progress. And then you have some big projects, some of the large stormwater projects. I think, coming down the line here shortly, the Brevard Zoo Aquarium Project, that's going to be transformational. While it's not going to be, what we think, so it's not like restoring a wetland. The fact is it's going to move that restoration movement forward. And we have centers like that in really strategic places throughout the lagoon. Florida Oceanographic Society in Martin County, Marine Discovery Center. I just came down from there up in New Smyrna Beach. So the people gather, they learn, they get excited, then they get wet and dirty. And once they get wet and dirty, you have them for life. I mean, we could sit like this all day long and talk about what's cool about, fishing or chasing gators and occasional crocodiles in the lagoon. You get people out in the water and they become ambassadors, for the effort. And it's a lifelong, learning experience where parents take kids, kids have that experience in the wild, and then they become, the next scientist or resource manager. So I'm excited about that. But the big news this year was really what happened in Tallahassee. So for the first time in decades, there was a bill passed. It was part of a large water bill. And in that bill was the Indian River Lagoon Protection Program. It was part of the governor's executive order a year ago, January, and $100 million was allocated and appropriated for projects. And sometimes, I think in the next maybe month, maybe sooner, we'll see the projects that are going to be funded through the Department of Environmental Protection. But $100 million, we have never seen that kind of single commitment, from Tallahassee. We've had great support over the years, but that's one of those historic moments. And the pledge from the governor was $100 million every year, 4 years. But every year we're going to have to be working to make sure that that appropriation happens. But that's really exciting. And it's something I hadn't seen. 40 years, I've never seen that level of commitment. So take state, what Brevard's got going, it's an exciting time.
It's great that people are finally taking it seriously, what's happening, which is what it really seems like. People are going, oh, there is something wrong that we need to work on.
303 projects last year alone. And that's not including the projects that we fund through the National Estuary Program. We like to track who's doing what. And it's starting to get hard to track because there's so much going on.
So you were talking about with including the studies, including the community in the studies, and you're right. It's a great with the aquarium that's being built. It's another great way to include the community with all those different things that are going on. It's I think it's beautiful the way it's all working out with that. But we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast. There's so much still we don't know, right? I mean, with the seagrasses in general, we really don't. Do we understand how they flower, how they germinate, how they really spread what they need to spread, the water clarity they need for things? I mean, what is it what are the biggest question marks we don't have answers to right now?
So let me start with what we know. It's a shorter list. So in order to be a flowering plant, you have to have light. And so if water quality is bad, harmful algal blooms shade that light. If it lasts for a long time, you won't have plants. And that's exactly what happened over those 9 years. Just this persistent, shifting harmful algal blooms, cutting out the light, impacting seagrass growth. But you can imagine if you're a flowering plant, in order for those flowers to happen, you have to have pollination. And very much like bees and terrestrial flowers, that same thing's happening in the Indian River Lagoon. We have 7 species of seagrasses, maybe an 8th coming, because there's one coming from the Caribbean, that we see as an exotic, but it's moving through the Caribbean and into Florida fast. But in order for seagrasses to expand, and you have to think of, almost like you're a farmer. So you can have a small number of plants on an acre, but you still have an acre. You can have a large number of plants on an acre, side by side, right next to each other, and the density, or the coverage is higher. And so what happens is that triggers to these 7 species are different. In most cases, we have no idea what those triggers are that will cause a plant to flower, then seed. But once those seeds are distributed, then that becomes the recruitment, to spread those beds to other areas. So you can imagine if you lost 90% of your flower and seed stock, trying to recover from that, it's going to take a really long time. And we were shocked what happened this year. So we're thinking there had to be seeds out there that we didn't know about, and they may have been dormant in the sediment. But one of the beauties of where we are now is that we know we need to get smarter about seagrass biology, ecology. We are going to basically become seagrass farmers, driving it with volunteers and the best available science. And what's really nice about where we are at the moment is we are either in construction or in full production in 5 seagrass nurseries funded through our program from some of the federal funding from the Infrastructure Investment Act. And so there'll be a seagrass nursery at Florida Oceanographic Society. Brevard Zoo's planning 2, could be more. We've got another in Marine Discovery Center, one down at Florida Atlantic University at Harbor Branch, and a private sector company called Sea and Shoreline LLC, and they do seagrass restoration for a business. And they're all together. So they're all working together, learning together. We're going to fail together. And, in the political world that I work, you get public funds. There isn't a whole lot of tolerance for failure. And I've been telling everybody, farming's not easy. And we're going to plant and lose plants. And it may be because of a weather event, could be an algal bloom, could be a hungry manatee. And we have seagrasses, manatees are going to find them. It's like putting the salad buffet out, after a couple of years of being really starved. And so we're right at the beginning of a kind of a learning restoration curve that I'm excited about. I wish I was 20 years old rather than as old as I am, because we won't be smart in this probably. It'll take us a decade to get smarter than we are, but we're never going to be able to answer every question in the system.
Yeah, there's going to be a learning curve, basically, right?
And every one of those species will be a little different. 3 are the dominant species, and that's where we're going to focus on the 3 that were the most dominant historically. One is easier to seed than others, and then, we'll start playing with the new crops, probably, starting within the growth season this next year.
So besides the seagrasses, what are the biggest challenges you think the lagoon system is facing right now? Yeah, we talked about algae blooms. We talked about seagrasses. What do you think the third biggest thing is we're facing?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and the only way to answer it is to first answer a different question, and that is, what makes us so vulnerable to stressors? And when I first came in, we were talking about causeways. So this system is very narrow, very shallow, and it's called microtidal. We've only got a few inlets, and they're restricted inlets. So unlike Puget Sound, Long Island Sound, even over on Tampa Bay, we are not a system that flushes with the ocean to any great degree. And so when you look at this long, thin microtidal system, all of the stressors and the sources of the problem are here on land. And people want to know which is the worst. And I say they're all bad. They're just bad depending on where you're looking. So up here in Titusville, you know, it's the growth. It's all the runoff from the roads. It's the septic tanks. It's inadequate wastewater systems and old systems and, you know, wastewater lines that are leaky. And then you go down all the way to the south to Martin County, and you've got to look west to that large agricultural expanse around Lake Okeechobee. And so those stressors you have to look at, you know, in segments. And that's how we're going to have to restore. There is no single, you know, multi-million-dollar project that's going to provide what we call the downstream impact, because our downstream is driven by wind and it's pretty small in its area. Even at the inlet this summer, you know, we've always heard people say, well, why don't you cut another inlet? You won't have any more problems. Our worst water quality this summer, north and south of Sebastian Inlet. Our worst fish kills, north and south of Sebastian Inlet. And so there isn't any silver bullet, but, you know, to answer your question directly, starts with wastewater. And that's both sides, the wastewater centralized system getting old and inadequate, and the failures that happen when we have rains, and then the septic systems, and then it's stormwater. So you imagine this narrow system, and we're pushing from the west and also from the Barrow Island, but a lot is happening where we've diverted water off the watershed all the way up to I-95. I mean, eventually, if it's coming downhill, it's eventually going to reach the lagoon. And so that's where the sources are being transferred. So I like to say, go after the root causes, which is the source, but don't forget that in order for that pollution or nutrient or sediment to get to the lagoon, it's got to have a conveyance. Yep. And that's stormwater, groundwater, can even be atmospheric deposition. We get a lot of nitrogen just in wet, dry atmospheric deposition.
I think people a lot of times forget that the ocean also has issues as well.
It actually does.
Yeah, it has a lot of issues as well.
And I don't know if you've been on the water lately. If you see how high the water is right now, and up in New Smyrna, I had to stop and went, whoa. You know, it looked like storm level, but we're in the king tide. It's fall. Just came off a full moon. And then we have these hydrological phenomena, you know, offshore that impact that water level. And so we have super high water right at the moment.
What are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about the lagoon and the issue it's having? And we mentioned the inlet thing, which we've all heard a million times. But what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about what's happening out there? What's really going on?
That's a great question. Probably the misconception I worry about most is that you can't solve this problem. It's too big to solve. The lagoon is dead, and we're never going to get back, you know, to what we'd like to see. Now, an honest answer is we'll never get back to 40 years ago, because that's not how this works. But we could have a very productive, you know, very healthy lagoon in the next decade with the right level of investment and the right focus. So that's one misconception, is that this is a trajectory that we can't stop and reverse. And that's been shown in Narragansett Bay, you know, up in a lot of places, really, Puget Sound. But you have to keep the pressure on. It's not one and done. But the other misconception is that the little stuff doesn't matter. You know, the litter isn't part of the problem. That, you know, your septic tank that you haven't had inspected at your home for 30 years because it's never backed up into your house, that somehow that's not a problem because it's just your house and 3 people may be living. So it's that death by 1,000 cut thing that a lot of people don't understand. So every individual could do something. Fertilizer is a perfect one that's going to be debated again this year, I think, in Tallahassee, that, you know, fertilizing your lawn is not a big deal. Well, sure, it's not as big a deal as stormwater and wastewater and, septic tanks, but it's something that you can make a decision on your property, save money, save water, and save the lagoon by just using less. So I think it's that, feeling of not being able to make a difference. That worries me the most, because we can make a difference at the individual level, at the community level, and it just takes public will and, a commitment to clean water.
What are a couple of studies that are going on that people may have not heard of that maybe that are going on out there you'd like to highlight?
There's a lot of research happening right now, and that's one area we could use a little bit more funding. But, some of the work that's being done with seagrasses, I think, is going to be transformational in how we restore the system, and it's at the very beginning of understanding. And I'll give you a really good example, and we'll have a picture of this in our annual report, which will be out in a few weeks. But we heard a lot from folks saying, you're wasting your time, wasting your money planting seagrasses, water quality's not good enough. And we just said, well, look, there's no perfect time. So let's do the research. And there's a picture from Florida Oceanographic Society. And we have to cage, so we'll put a barrier in order to just let those plants stabilize. And there's a photograph where you've got this perfect, it looks like a seagrass rug of green, edge to edge, in that fenced area. And it looks like moonscape everywhere on the outside periphery. So that's one area of research that's important. The other area is in how nutrients work in the system and how nutrients fuel harmful algal blooms. And we've got a lot to learn there. So we've got different species that respond to different environmental conditions. And so 2011, it was a tiny green cyanobacteria. We still don't even know what it is. And then it was the brown tide. And then this summer, and you probably saw it because you were on the water, we had one of those summers of bioluminescence where everybody was out at night in a kayak going, oh my gosh, look how beautiful the night lights are. Well, it's an algal bloom. And it's a algal bloom of a species that can be quite damaging and at times toxic. It's called pyrodinium, night light. And why this year? What are the environmental parameters that shift from one player to another player? And that is something we have a lot of really complicated science, to figure out, because plankton are good
back and forth, right?
Yeah, plankton are good in general. So you don't want a glass, gin clear lagoon because you have to feed the fish and all the animals. But what is that balance between harmful and healthy? And so we've got a lot of work to do on that.
Yeah, buddy, that's heavy. That's some serious stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And the good news is we have a lot of really serious scientists in this, watershed. Just within the National Estuary Program, we have 26 organizations that are conducting science at some level, from Brevard Zoo and Marine Discovery Center as nonprofits, all the way to the major universities like Florida Institute of Technology, UF, UCF. I mean, so we've got the brain power, and, brain power can only be, operationalized if you have the money to do the work.
Yes,
you mentioned earlier, too, that there are opportunities for people to volunteer.
Very
Can you tell
much
us a little bit about, for people that do have time they want to donate, what ways can they get involved?
So easiest way is to give us a call and we can steer you in the right direction. Because a lot of it, if you want to volunteer, for the most part, you volunteer close to your home.
Yep.
And if you have young kids, they're going to balance that volunteerism with soccer or baseball or football. And so it's not like you're going to drive all the way down to Stewart in order to put a couple hours in the water. And so all of our nonprofits in Brevard County, we've got Brevard Zoo has an unbelievably strong, volunteer force. And this is what's coming that has me excited. We're going to need citizen volunteers to do this restoration. And so we're calling it that we're building a community of practice that will be kind of fueled by scientists, delivered by our nonprofits, but utilizing basic citizens who get trained to either plant seagrasses, plant oysters, go out and plant clams. And we are in that midst of building that community of practice right now. And just imagine, if we had 1,000 folks out there all working to restore a system. It's like having 1,000 Johnny Appleseeds, planting and seeding. And we're really impressed by what we see from the nonprofits. UCF, they've been doing oyster reef restoration up in Mosquito Lagoon. I think there are over 30,000 volunteers in the last decade.
Wow.
Yeah, so
that's amazing.
Yeah, day to day you don't see it, but there is a very dedicated community of practice that's already out there, and I'd love to see it grow, and I'm sure it will.
That's incredible. That's a lot of people. That's great.
Can you imagine if we had to pay consultants to do that work?
Yeah, no joke. Yep, that's one of the beautiful things about, again, including the community, including nonprofits and stuff, is they can put it all together and just, it's amazing when a community comes together to make something happen. And I've been saying that privately for a long time, that until we can actually get the people here on the Space Coast that are directly involved with the lagoon to actually all get on the same page and go help. Man, that's how you make a difference. You get everybody on the same page and you go help get something done. It's great that it's going
powerful.
That way.
Yeah,
Very
people
powerful.
that have put in that sweat equity and have actually gotten out there and done the work, those are the people that form a personal attachment to what's going on and become the fiercest advocates and defenders and the biggest voices for the lagoon that could exist.
Yep, that's great.
And it's fun getting dirty.
It is.
Even at my age, it's fun getting dirty.
I hurt more now than I used to. But
yeah, I
other
hurt
than
too. But it's fun while you're doing it.
It is. You're right. You don't think about it at the time. So let's chat about this event we have coming up here, the EcoFest event in Cocoa Village on January 19th. You are opening speaker for that day, where we're trying to highlight a bunch of different nonprofits who are doing things around the Space Coast. This is when I learned about the Megafauna Foundation, which I had no idea they were doing research locally here with manta rays and things. I had no idea that was going on. That's some really, there's so many incredible groups that are doing so much stuff here locally, and it's a way for us with EEARSS to try to highlight them and what they're doing, things they're working on, different organizations like yours, and so many incredible people here doing life-altering things. And we just want to say thank you for being there and being willing to come there and chat with everybody and tell them what's going on and just kind of have this conversation.
No, that's great, and I'm proud to be there, and thanks for the invitation. But you asked about one of those misconceptions.
Yeah.
And while it's not a broad misconception, we hear often on the street, not only it's not solvable, but that nobody's doing anything. And that my presentation is going to be a little bit of a showcase of how much is actually going on out there. And, it's a big system. And so, if you're driving by on a causeway and you do this, you may not see anything happening, but there is a tremendous amount of work, all focused on trying to restore the system to what we want. So I'm going to showcase some of the data on who's doing what's exciting.
Oh, that's amazing.
We've got a pretty good accounting of the players out there, and most of them actually are directly engaged within the National Estuary Program in a formal way.
Okay. I'm excited. I'm excited to hear it. Thank you very much. All right, guys. Ready to call it an afternoon?
Call it an afternoon, yes,
All
I
right.
suppose.
Duane, thank you so much for being here and chatting with us about all this stuff. What is your all's website if somebody wanted to go learn more about the organization or how to volunteer with you guys?
Yeah, onelagoon.org. Everything that we produce is part of the public record. But also, if you want to get in touch with me, the phone number on our website comes right to my cell phone. You don't get
Dangerous.
a secretary. You know what? At first, everybody said, you're crazy. And the fact is, I have met so many people kind of just looking for an answer or looking for I'm having trouble getting to the right agency. And so I just take the public. I serve the public, and they get to me directly. And I try my best to solve their problems, or at least help them get to the right place. So onelagoon.org, and there's a lot there. And if you have problems, call us.
It's a beautiful website, and I do the same thing with my phone number. I give it to everybody too, and it's on our website and stuff, and it's never letting anything crazy quite yet. So
I've had a couple crazy, but the ones I scare when they give you their first name and they say, "Do you remember me?" and you're going, "I know a lot of Toms," and they wait. It's like you're supposed to. 20 years ago we were at Florida Institute of Technology together. Then you're really embarrassed.
Oh Lord, yeah, it's people. We're a special bunch. But again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Bill, Cindy, I reckon until next week. It's awesome to be back to Wednesdays.
Yes, it's good to be back to Wednesdays.
Super excited to be back to Wednesdays.
Yep.
I feel like the whole week's ahead of me now.
There you go. Yeah.
So it's great. I got a whole other week to get stuff done. A whole other rest of the week to get stuff done. I had a thought process to that, but it just came out weird. So it is what it is. Anyhow, thank you all for tuning into the EEARSS Podcast. You can find us on all platforms by searching EEARSS, EEARSS.org. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you all next week. Bye-bye.